This is James Gorey with the Banana Republican. Um, hey, today we're going to talk about the Iran war, what's going on there. Huge things going on there, obviously. Huge stuff. So, but we're going to look at, there's so much to talk about, but let's look at it from the position of that some people are saying, well, Israel is the one that's telling the U.S. what to do. It's the tails wagging the dog, as it were, right? Um, Is the U.S. foreign policy in Iran and the Middle East dictated by Israel? I don't know. Maybe. It's influenced by Israel, certainly. They're an ally. But is Netanyahu telling Trump what to do? Probably not. I think there's some things that they agree on and they disagree on. But I think it's worth noting that the U.S. has been targeted by Iran for decades. And the U.S. has been involved in Iran easily since the 50s, when Eisenhower took out Mossadegh, the duly elected president of Iran. In the 50s, I guess 51 or 2, I think it was 51, he was elected. He promptly nationalized the U.S. and British oil companies. The Brits talked to the U.S. Eisenhower said, okay, the CIA overthrew Mossadegh literally by walking down the street and saying, we're taking Mossadegh out. I think it was that quick, that simple, and we replaced him with the Shah. And the Shah was a pro-Western dictator, king, and Iran was thriving. Iran back then was a ally of Israel, very westernized. And look, the Iranian people are very smart people. The Persian culture is very, very ancient and capable culture, and the people are very smart. They're not Arabic. They're Persian. Well, there's a difference, and they will tell you that. The Arabs will tell you that, and the Persians will tell you that. So, just as a background, the U.S. has been involved in Iran since, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 years, 70 years ago. And the reality is that Israel at that point wasn't really that big of a deal in terms of its ability to influence U.S. Policy. Now, that said, there is a tremendous amount of coordination, collaboration between the U.S. and Israel, for good reason. Israel is a terrific ally, and it's a democratic ally in a sea of Islamic dictatorships and strongmen, as it were, failed states. So it makes perfect sense to have Israel as an ally. Now, does that mean they're perfect? Oh no, by no means. But there are a lot of reasons why our interests are confluent. They move in the same direction. And the fact is that Iran has been doing a variety of things, whether it's bombing U.S. troop encampments in Lebanon in the 80s, killing 250 people then. We should have done it then, actually. I think Reagan should have just said, we're taking you out. Done. They were already weakened by the war with Iraq at that time, and I think we should have done it then. That would have been a perfect prompt to do so, but it didn't happen. So, at the same time, is it in Israel's interest that the Iranian regime be replaced? Absolutely. Is it in the Iranian people's interest that the regime be replaced? Absolutely. Is it in the Saudi Arabians' interest that the regime be replaced? Absolutely. Is it in the Europe's interest that the regime be replaced? Absolutely. Is it in America's interest that the regime be replaced? Absolutely. So there are a lot of confluent interests. Now, Russia's not happy about it. China's not happy about it. Turkey probably is not happy about it. So you've got some people that are not nice people aligned with other not nice people. So big surprise there, huh? Now, here's the thing. Couple things to keep in mind. One, there's been years and decades of kind of accommodation and whether it's the 2015 kind of nuclear agreement that Obama put together, which Iran would never abide by, never did. I don't care what the narrative is on the left. Um, the regime is a messianic, millenarian regime. They think Islam needs to be the world dominant religion, and it looks like it's going to be that way. Now it looks that way. That doesn't mean it will be, but it looks that way. So the Islamic folks, especially the radicals in Iran, um, starting with the first Ayatollah, they have their marching orders, they have their goals, and they've been very successful. Not without the collusion of the West, of big banks, of big leaders. It was Jimmy Carter who allowed the Shah to be deposed, by the way. We put him in, and he allowed him to be deposed, and allowed Khomeini to come to power, not come back, to come to power, way back when, in 1979. It was Carter who did that. It was Obama who sent them billions of dollars in cash. Cash. That was in 2016, 2015, on a transport plane. And there's no doubt that the Iranians used that money to build up their Islamic terror network and to fund their proxies, the Houthis in Yemen, who have been terrorizing Saudi Arabia, Hezbollah in Lebanon to the north, who've been terrorizing the Lebanese, and of course Israel, the northern Israel, and people in the north. Obviously Hamas, and in Gaza, as well as Islamic Jihad on the West Bank, I think it is, and Palestinian Jihad. There's just a number of proxies that Iran has funded, and the U.S. certainly helped them do that. Okay, so that's the reality. This isn't as black and white as we'd like it to be, as I would like it to be. We have a lot of turncoats, a lot of traitorous people in the banking system, the global banks, at the highest offices in power. So Obama funded them. There's no way around this. Obama funded terrorists in Iran. So those are big things, and you got to ask why he did that and how he did that and so forth. I think he should be. I think he should pay a price, be punished for that. But whether or not he will, I don't know. Who knows? But now Trump comes to power in the second term, missing that, between Biden and Obama, Biden and Harris, and he comes to power, and what does he see? He sees a rising China. He sees a war that's ongoing in Russia, and he sees China everywhere, which they are, and he has Iran saying we're going to wipe Israel, and we're going to attack America, death to America, all that kind of stuff. So, and he says he sees Iran triggering a war because they have all these missiles and they're disseminating missiles and they're funding proxies, as I said earlier. So there's a lot going on, and whether they get nuclear fissile material or not, they don't have to create it. They can just buy it or even be given it. So the intent is there, the will is there. It's just a matter of capabilities, and capabilities, come in a lot of different packages. So, a nuclear weapon could fall off the back of a truck, in the desert somewhere, and they find it. I mean, there's all kinds of scenarios. So, I think it's my opinion that when Trump came to power, back in office, he said, "Look, we have a couple of things here, a couple of different agendas that have a lot of overlapping factors, enablers." So, as I mentioned, Iran is a destabilizing influence in the region, and they're also an enabler of China. They provide China buys almost all their oil. Before that, China bought a lot of oil from Venezuela. Now, not nearly as much, but whether or not Israel had any interest in American foreign policy toward China, certainly they do. But I think whether or not this benefited Israel, I think Trump was correct in doing what he's been doing. Now, Iran is just a second or third stage. I'll put this in a China context. Trump knows that China is our overarching global adversary. And China is using these different failed dictatorial states, energy-rich states, to facilitate their rise, at the same time degrade our power and influence in the world. Okay, so let me break that down. First, Panama. Trump goes to Panama and says, "Look, China, you're no longer going to be influencing and controlling the Panama Canal." He tells the Panamanians, "You violated the 1978 Panama Treaty, and so that's going to stop." And so that went on. Then Trump went into Venezuela, and we all know what happened there. He captured Maduro. He had someone else put into power, and now Venezuela, which has some of the world's largest oil reserves, if not the largest, they're not oriented toward China. And remember, in Venezuela were Chinese, Iranians, Russians, Cubans, everybody that hates us who was living in Venezuela doing nasty things, okay, enabling China, funding, or excuse me, providing oil and energy and infrastructure for China, Iran, Cuba to do all those kinds of things. All right, so that's gone away. So Panama, Venezuela, and Cuba is next, by the way, at some point, or not next, soon, I would imagine. But now we're Iran. Now the Israeli factor was a big one. Netanyahu said, "Look, we had to attack them now while we still can." And that's the North Korea lesson that happened under Bill Clinton. In 1994, North Korea got nuclear weapons from Pakistan. And so the North Koreans looked at what happened in Iraq and in the Gulf War, and said, "We can't do that. We have to have some reason, some way to push back and to prevent the U.S. from taking us over." And that was the driving factor there. So North Korea got a nuke, and the U.S. doesn't invade North Korea. Is that the causality or just correlation? Who knows? But you get the point. So from Trump's perspective, he could either try to continue to manage the game as it is, the game board, Russia or Iran, China with Iran and Russia and that alliance, and Venezuela and Panama, or he could disrupt the game. And that's what he's chosen to do. He did a disruptive calculus. He changed the game, and China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, Panama, so far, it's all been aimed at pushing back China and recapturing and realigning these nations and their resources to American interest, and by the way, bringing some freedom and liberty along the way. So that's what's going on, I think, with Iran. Does it mean there's not confluent interests? Of course there are. There absolutely are. Does that mean that Israel is deciding when and where, how and why, and in what context the U.S. attacks Iran? No, it doesn't. It means that people get together and say, "Look, how can we make this the most effective as possible with the least amount of casualties?" And by the way, that involved Israeli intelligence. I'm just learning now, apparently, I think it was on Telegram, that the Israelis had hacked the traffic cameras in Tehran years ago and encrypted all the data, all the patterns of all the people driving around, especially these high security areas, and they figured out who the bodyguards are, what cars they drive, where they go, when they arrive, who they're protecting, what their life patterns are, I guess is what they called it in that business of intelligence. So they could determine who went where. And then recently, maybe a month ago, maybe less than a month ago, when it was let out or leaked out or however it was put out in the news that a U.S. attack was imminent, on Iran, that was a ploy to see where they scattered, see where they hid, see where all the bad people went, and which is brilliant, by the way. So when we did hit in broad daylight, We knew where they were. And it's no accident that the attack took out the ruling power, the ruling elite. Khomeini, his kids, his sons, his captains, his generals, everybody in that top layer is gone. Anybody who needed to be at that meeting on a Saturday morning was gone, was vaporized. And that's no accident. And interestingly enough, the biggest wave isn't even coming. Hasn't even come yet. That isn't the biggest wave. They've decapitated the government, and the second tier guy came up. He's gone. There's been reports that Ahmadinejad has been killed, and other reports that he hasn't. I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to say, but I think it's safe to say that you don't want to be the next guy nominated to run Iran under the current regime. Your shelf life is about 48 minutes, I think. I shouldn't laugh, but it is horrible. It is horrible, but it is also, it's just a big, big deal. And it goes way beyond the Israel question. Because remember this, and I just wrote a piece for the Epoch Times on this. It hasn't come out yet, but I talk about how China is the third wheel between Israel and the U.S. because both the Israel and the U.S. are highly dependent on China for technology, for markets, things like that, right? Economically, trade and finance and some technology. So that's a big issue that I bring up. I talk about just how much China is a kind of the third wheel, right? And three's a crowd, and that can't go on forever. So both the U.S. and Israel are yoked to China, dependent on China, and economically engaged with China. That's not going to disappear tomorrow, I don't think. So it's a problem, and I think it's a problem for their security. And so it wasn't just about Israel and their fear, rightly so, of Iran's continuing destabilizing the region and making war against Iran by proxy and by themselves. They did send missiles over in the 12-day war earlier last summer. So Israel had plenty of reasons why they wanted this regime gone. And quite frankly, I don't really care if Netanyahu got on the phone and said, hey, DJ, we know they're going to be here. Why don't we just do it now? Yeah, let's do it. I don't care. I mean, they're close. They're in the proximity. And there's this. I will say that it is kind of interesting, humorous in a dark way. One of the leaders of Iran, it might have been Khomeini, this last one or prior one, but they said about identifying a special branch to weed out, Israeli agents within the Iranian government, and they found out that the guy who they appointed to do that was with the Mossad, was an Israeli spy. So whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it sounds true. It sounds true, right? I mean, Israel has been able to kill pretty much anybody they wanted over there at any time for decades. At least, going back to the exploding pagers and cell phones. What was that, a year or two ago? I guess a year ago. Anyhow, so Trump has said, look, we're going to disrupt this board game. And the Iranian attack and the biggest wave that's going to come, I don't know what it means. I mean, I know generally what it means, but I don't know what it looks like. Has yet to come. Trump is disrupting the entire international order. And I think there's a lot of risk for that, but there's a lot of risk in not doing it. Things weren't going well. China was ascendant in a lot of ways. And I wrote a piece earlier on China's energy needs and the energy angle. And why Trump is disrupting the energy angle in China. And that is this. China is building coal-fired power plants as fast as it can. Yes, they're the leader in green technology, green energy, solar, wind, etc., but they're also the leader in coal-fired plants, right up there near the top, right? And the reason being is because AI requires so much energy. And Trump knows that cutting off their energy sources like Iran and Venezuela, as well as kicking them out of the hemisphere, all that goes towards diminishing China's position, China's power. So it's not just energy for the energy's sake, it's energy for the sake of AI. It's also degrading China's status in the world in terms of BRICS. Remember, BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And as I mentioned before, early in his second term, Trump met or spoke with obviously Russia, obviously China, India. Modi was over. Brazil, he had a spat, I think. I don't think they met. They may have, but I don't think they did. But certainly had a spat going back and forth. And he had the South African leader in the White House, which is when he showed him that recording of people in his party saying kill the Boer, kill the white people, and so forth. So if you think about it from a BRICS perspective, Trump had interaction with every member of the BRICS coalition. And there's a reason for that. He wants to be able to he wants to destroy BRICS. He wants to be able to say, look, I'll make it worth your while to release BRICS. So he's looking for a divide and conquer strategy there. And a big part of that divide and conquer is to degrade China as the leader of BRICS. Because China's out to de-dollarize their economy and de-dollarize the world. And the fiat economy that the US dollar has been leading is pretty much over, I think, in all but name only. So another part of this was to undercut, to hollow out the BRICS currency, because making it less desirable, less attractive as you devalue and degrade China's economic abilities and their military abilities and their AI abilities. And so at the same time, speaking to that, is the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, where in China has, and I wrote a piece of this recently out of Africa, where China has cut their investments by 85% in some cases. The reason being is that they're no longer just flooding money into these, they're gaining access and power, access to the levers of power, building infrastructure, ports, railways, and military bases and so forth, but it's costing them a ton of money and their economy's crashing. China's economy is crashing, and they're doing everything they can to sustain it. Now, their foreign growth, their foreign economy is doing great. Their export economy is still doing pretty well, but internally, it's going south. And China is a collapse happening, and it's relying on its export-driven economy to sustain it. And Trump is trying to pull that away, obviously. Now, it's where the tariffs are coming in, too. So understand all this context behind it's not just about denuclearizing, demissilizing Iran and protecting Israel. It's also tremendous impact on China, on China's influence in the West, China's access to energy, China's ability to project power, undercutting BRICS, and punishing China economically to destabilize China. That's what we'd like to see, is to destabilize and make life very, very difficult for Xi Jinping. Now, he's not missing any meals, but he's not very popular. You know why he's not popular? The reason you can tell that is because he keeps purging his military. Now, if you're popular, you got a popular military. The military supports you. If you're not popular and your military is not supporting you, you got to purge them. And that's what's happening. So Xi Jinping is not doing well in China. He's like Stalin. He's purging everybody. His economy is tanking. And so this whole hit on Iran is a big part of that. Okay? And by the way, Iran's been a Russian proxy as well for many, many years, many decades. I mean, they are where they are. They're located in Russia's backyard. So the U.S. is really trying to rearrange, redefine the global world. And by the way, people say, well, he's upsetting the rules-based economy. Well, the rules-based economy only works when people follow the rules. And when people abuse it, then it destroys it and no longer works. And that's been going on a long time. China joined the World Trade Organization in the year 2000. They have never followed the rules. They were supposed to give the world access to their domestic economy. Never happened. Okay, so ultimately, Trump, as he said at the World Economic Forum, we want to disrupt the globalists. Yes, we want to make people, we want countries to be countries. We want nations to be nations. Enough of this globalism stuff. Nothing good comes of that. The World Economic Forum is here's a side note here, full of bad people. You and I are useless feeders, and they don't like us. We're devalued. Again, that's part of devaluing human life. So from a standpoint of the big picture, Trump is, for all his flaws, and he has many, but he sees and he understands the dynamics of power, of energy, of AI, and the projection of power and the perception of currency and value. And those are all factors, I think, that went on in this decision. I think it was a smart decision, but we'll have to see if that intelligence continues. I don't know what this next wave is going to do. I don't. Do we have someone we can put in power? I know the son of Reza Pahlavi is waiting in the wings, and he's putting out these missives on YouTube. Hey, show the Iranian weapons and start a new era in Iran. And Iranians, the Iranian diaspora around the world is celebrating. So there's a lot of goodwill. And by the way, it's a good thing there are a lot of Iranians outside of Iran. They have talent, they have know-how, they have experience, and they can come back to Iran and bring all that capability. So there's no ramp up. Remember when the Soviet Union fell? Well, there were no Russian expatriates. There wasn't the millions. No one could go out. They built a wall. No one could get anywhere, right? So they had a tough time adapting to capitalism. They killed everybody who knew what to do. In this case, Iranians live in Australia and South Africa and the US and Canada and Europe and Latin America and Asia. They can all go back to Iran and really help them out and really help the economy out. They can really bring a lot of capital, a lot of know-how, a lot of influence, a lot of connections. That's a possibility. Okay, what does the Bible say about this? Well, I just heard from another YouTuber, and I haven't verified it. Apparently, Marco Rubio mentioned Jeremiah 49, 35 to 38. I could be wrong on the chapters. It had to do with a Jeremiah prophecy about Iran. In this instance, it's a region called Elam, which I believe is in Iran. I think it's in the north, but I could be wrong. But the point being is that they're talking about Elam, and God says, I will break your bow. And bow meaning if you have a bow and an arrow, the arrow is what the bow launches, right? You pull it back and you shoot it, and so, and I will also destroy, it says, I will also destroy your most fierce weapons. I'm paraphrasing, but the gist is that we're destroying their missile capabilities and we're destroying their nuclear capabilities. Nobody fears the Navy. Nobody fears the Iranian army. Nobody fears the Iranian Air Force or Marines, but they do fear missiles and nukes. The world fears those two things, and those are what it says will be taken out. Also, not nukes, but the most fearsome weapon. It also mentions that the king will be killed, his princes and his captains will be killed. Sounds like what happened Saturday. I don't know to what degree Secretary Rubio referred to it. I haven't seen it yet. I've just heard of it by somebody else. So I don't know. But I do know that he's a Christian. And I do know that I'm familiar with the verse. I've read the verses. And it says that. And I'm giving you the quick and dirty translation. But the gist of it is that you'll be decapitated. We're going to decapitate Iran, Persia. And that's what happens. And it also says it will establish his throne in Persia. And it just so happens that Christianity is in Iran is exploding. And that's going to continue. So biblically, it seems to track with what happened. What goes on next, we don't know, but we'll have to see. But in any case, I'm James Gorey. This is the Banana Republican. And if you like content like this, well, check us out more often and like, subscribe, and share. And please do so post haste. And we'll see you next time.